enjoyed your presentation very much. I'm curious, does the worm have a substantia nigra?
No. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are 302 neurons in the worm. There are 8 dopaminergic neurons, I believe about 78 glutamatergic,
Right.
GABAergic neurons, serotonergic neurons, pretty much everything you see in humans, but they don't have a blood-brain barrier, and the neurons are not encapsulated, in a bony structure. These are obviously invertebrates, so they don't have a brain, they don't have a substantia nigra, but they have 8 dopaminergic neurons.
And
We have millions.
right. Do you know how many mitochondria are in those neurons?
So the cell size is pretty equivalent to what you see in mammalian systems. And the number of mitochondria, I don't know the exact number, but it's very similar to what you see in humans. The ATP synthesis, the process is identical to humans, yes.
So there's 2 million mitochondria in a human neuron for the substantia nigra. So where is copper and iron in this model?
Copper, specifically, where does copper go in the worm?
Yeah, I mean,
There are studies on copper uptake in the worm. There are copper transporters in the worm. I'm not familiar with actually any studies that looked at the relationship between copper and Parkinson's disease.
because in the human, the substantia nigra has the highest concentration of copper in the brain, in the basal ganglia. The locus ceruleus
Is lower.
has 10 times more copper than the substantia nigra.
Okay.
But what caught my eye was when Dr. Boyd was talking about Dr. Bogue, B-O-G-U-E. Maybe you can unravel this sentence. It's like a worm, However, in 1874, E.A. Bogue, M.D., who had conducted experiments on amalgam at a special meeting of the New York Odontological Society, stated, quote, "It will be seen that if almost any amalgam is used intelligently, teeth can be filled so as not only to preserve them, but to do so without danger to the general health from any element of the filling, unless it be copper." What is the relationship between copper and mercury? And mercury has a relationship with cysteine, so does copper. Does mercury knock out copper? Is that what it's doing?
There might be exchange between a lot of these transporters. I know, for example, from our manganese, the manganese transporter will transport copper, for example. A lot of the divalent metal transport, a lot of the divalent ions are transported by DMT1, the divalent metal transporter 1. Once you start changing levels of any of these metals, everything else changes. I think what you need to think is in broader terms. It's not just, mercury affecting copper, it's mercury affecting copper and iron and manganese and nickel and everything else. We did one study many years ago. We put animals on iron depleted diet, and the reason for that is because the iron and manganese transporters are shared. We thought we would see only differences in manganese concentration in the brain, higher concentration because of less iron now being consumed by the animals. What we found was almost everything changed, all the metals that we looked at. I don't think you can keep the mercury in the amalgam because there's very good studies, other than the fact that it evaporates, it can be transported in nerves, the trigeminal nerve, for example. So it can certainly displace other divalent metals. Much more so the inorganic mercury, which is ++ versus methyl mercury, which I mostly talked about, which is +1. So also when you talk about the different metal species, it's always important to consider their valence.
Anybody else have a question?
Yes, thank you for the great talk. I was wondering whether you look only at mercury or other heavy metals like nickel, gold, and other heavy metals that we get in our teeth.
So it's certainly doable, but the only ones that we've looked at are, there's actually the link between Parkinson's disease and metals is much stronger for manganese. I don't know if you use it in any dental products, but manganese is very different because it's essential. Mercury is not essential. We function very well without it. None of us would be here if we didn't have lettuce for lunch. Manganese is essential. There's many enzymes that are manganese dependent. So we looked at manganese as well because of the relationship to Parkinson's disease. High levels of manganese is a very well documented risk factor for Parkinsonism. But we haven't done gold and depleted uranium or zirconium, no.
Anybody else? Well, going once, going twice, 3 times. Thank you all for coming. Let's give our speaker one more round of applause. I hope to see you all at our next meeting in DC area. It's in Alexandria. It's our 40th anniversary. And like I said, thank you all for coming. I hope you had a great weekend.